They say a house is just bricks and mortar. They're wrong. A house remembers everything. Every tear that falls on its floor, every prayer whispered into its walls, every moment of love that seeps into its foundation. And when someone tries to steal what isn't theirs, when greed poisons the air where love once lived, the house remembers. It remembers and it never forgets. My name is Margaret Foster, and I am 63 years old. I sit here today in this small rented room with evening light filtering through a single window, casting long shadows on these bare walls. But this isn't where my story ends. This is where I found my strength. This is where I learned that revenge isn't always about taking back what was stolen. Sometimes it is about watching karma do its work while you rebuild yourself from ashes they thought would never rise again. Let me take you back to when I had everything, and back to when I lost it all. I was born in a small town in rural Tennessee, where the summers burned gold and the earth smelled of red clay and memories. My father was a factory worker, my mother a seamstress who could turn nothing into everything. We weren't rich, but we were happy. That happiness taught me something precious, something I would carry through the darkest days of my life, that wealth lives in the heart, not in the hands. I was 19 when I married Robert Foster. We met at a church social, and he courted me properly, with flowers and Sunday dinners, and promises whispered under starlight. Robert worked as a civil engineer for the county, an honest man in a world that often punished honesty. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, to a small apartment that became our universe. 3 years later, our son Daniel was born, and I remember holding him for the first time, thinking that I finally understood what it meant to have your heart exist outside your body. Robert and I built our life brick by brick. We saved every dollar, sacrificed every luxury. I took in sewing work late into the night to earn extra money. Robert took on weekend projects, came home exhausted but never complained. We were building something not just for us, but for Daniel, for his future, for generations we would never see but could still touch through our efforts. 23 years into our marriage, we finally bought it. Our house, not just any house, but the house of our dreams. 3 bedrooms, a small garden where I could plant magnolias and azaleas, windows that caught the morning sun just right, and a kitchen where I could hear Robert's laughter from the living room. We poured everything into that house. I painted the walls myself, chose every tile, planted every seed in that garden with hands that trembled with joy. The house became alive with our presence. I had my reading corner by the window where I spent every morning with coffee and devotional readings, sitting in the same chair until the cushion molded to my shape. I cooked meals that filled every room with the smell of home. Robert brought plants and books, filled the shelves with stories and the garden with life. Daniel studied at the dining table, his engineering books scattered like promises of tomorrow. We lived there for 12 beautiful years. 12 years of birthday celebrations and Christmas lights. 12 years of spring rains drumming on the roof while we drank hot cocoa and talked about everything and nothing. 12 years of a life, well lived, well loved, well remembered. Then Robert died. A heart attack, sudden and merciless, took him on a Tuesday morning while he was reading the newspaper. One moment he was here, solid and real, and the next he was gone, leaving behind a silence so loud it drowned everything else. I was 51 years old, and I became a widow in the time it takes for a heart to stop beating. Grief is a strange companion. It sits with you at breakfast. It sleeps beside you at night. It holds your hand when you cry and stands silent when you can't. I grieved for Robert in that house, and the house held me. The walls absorbed my tears. The floor supported my weight when I couldn't stand. The garden continued to bloom because life doesn't stop, even when you want it to. Daniel was 26 then, working as an engineer in the same city. He moved back home to be with me, and I was grateful. We mourned together, learned to live with the absence together, found small joys again. Together he was my son, my heartbeat, my reason to wake up every morning. 2 years after Robert's death, Daniel told me he wanted to get married. Her name was Stephanie. She was 24, beautiful in that Polish way, with perfect hair and perfect nails and perfect ambitions. She worked in corporate marketing, wore designer clothes, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had never known struggle. When Daniel brought her home for the first time, I made her favorite dessert, welcomed her warmly, hugged her like the daughter I never had. I wanted to love her. God knows I tried. The wedding was grand, grander than we could afford, but Stephanie's parents insisted, and Daniel wanted to make her happy. I sold some of my jewelry, the pieces Robert had given me over the years, because I thought, what good are ornaments when your son's happiness is at stake? I wore a simple dress to the wedding and smiled through every moment, even though each piece of sold jewelry felt like selling a memory. After the marriage, Stephanie moved into our house. Our house, the house Robert and I had built with our blood and bones. I told myself it was natural, that this was how families worked. I gave them the master bedroom, the room where Robert and I had slept for 12 years, where his cologne still lingered in the closet. I moved to the smaller room, told myself I didn't mind, told myself this was what mothers did. At first, the changes were small. Stephanie wanted to redecorate. She didn't like the curtains, didn't like the wall colors, didn't like my furniture. I agreed to some changes, resisted others. The magnolia plants in the garden were the first to go, she said. They were too messy. Then my reading corner was eliminated because she needed that space for a modern entertainment center. Then my kitchen routines were questioned because she preferred ordering takeout. I adjusted. I bent. I accommodated. Because that is what I had done all my life, and because I thought love meant making space for others, even if that space came from carving pieces out of yourself. But Stephanie's appetite for change was insatiable. She wanted more. She always wanted more. 6 months into the marriage, she started talking about how outdated the house was, how it needed complete renovation, how her friends' homes were so much better. Daniel, my sweet boy who once brought me wildflowers from the roadside, began to see the house through her eyes. The house that his father built became old and embarrassing. The garden his father nurtured became a waste of space that could be a patio. The reading corner where his mother found peace became clutter that needed clearing. I watched my son transform before my eyes, like a photograph fading in sunlight, the original image slowly disappearing, replaced by something I didn't recognize. A year into their marriage, Stephanie suggested I should move to a retirement home. She said it sweetly, carefully, like offering poison and honey. She said I would be happier there, around people my own age, with better facilities, and care. Daniel sat silent, looking at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. I said no. I said this was my house, my home, the place where every brick knew my name. That is when everything changed. Stephanie stopped being sweet. The mask fell away, and I saw what had always been underneath, cold, calculated ambition. She started treating me like hired help in my own home. Cook this. Clean that. Don't sit in the living room when guests come. Don't wear bright colors. It is not appropriate for widows. Don't laugh too loud. Don't exist too much. I endured because I thought Daniel would see, would remember, would save me. But Stephanie was clever. She played her role perfectly when he was around, and I became the problem. I became the difficult mother-in-law, the traditional burden, the obstacle to their modern happiness. The final blow came on a rainy evening in October, exactly 2 years after their wedding. Stephanie had called Daniel's attention to some legal papers. She had researched, consulted lawyers, found loopholes. The house was in Robert's name, and as the legal heir, Daniel had primary rights. She convinced him that selling the house and buying a modern condo would be a better investment. She showed him numbers, projections, future values. She painted pictures of a life I wasn't part of. And my son, my Daniel, the boy I had carried in my womb, the child I had sacrificed everything for, agreed. I begged. For the first time in my life, I begged. I folded my hands before my own son and pleaded. This house was my last connection to his father. These walls held our memories. This garden grew from our dreams. I promised I would stay quiet, stay invisible, stay out of their way. I promised anything, everything, if they would just let me keep this one piece of my life. Stephanie's response was calm and cruel. Margaret, you are being emotional. It is just a house. You can come visit us in the new condo sometimes. Sometimes they gave me 1 month to leave, 1 month to pack up 35 years of marriage, 12 years of homemaking, and 61 years of existence into whatever I could carry. I spent that month like a ghost, walking through rooms that no longer recognized me as their owner. I touched walls I had painted, floors I had cleaned 10,000 times, windows I had opened every morning to let in light. I sat in the garden until the azaleas bloomed one last time, and I collected the flowers, pressed them between the pages of my Bible. I had nowhere to go. My parents were long dead. I had no siblings. I had spent my entire adult life building a family that was now discarding me like old furniture. The jewelry was gone, sold for Daniel's wedding. My savings were minimal. I had always put everything into the house, into our future. I found a small rented room in an old building across town, in a neighborhood where laundry hung from balconies, like flags of surrender, and children played basketball in cracked parking lots. One room, one window, one door that barely locked. The rent consumed half of the small widow's pension I received from Robert's civil service. The rest went to food, basic necessities, and the slow, grinding reality of poverty. On my last day in the house, I stood at the doorway and looked back. The house seemed to look back at me too, its windows like eyes, its walls breathing with memories. I placed my hand on the wall beside the door, the way I had done every morning for 12 years, and I whispered, "Remember me. Remember what we were. Remember the love that made you." I didn't say goodbye to Daniel. He had already left for work, unable to face me, or perhaps no longer caring to. Stephanie supervised my departure, like a landlord ensuring a tenant's exit, her face blank, her victory complete. I took one bag of clothes, my Bible with the pressed azalea flowers, and a photograph of Robert. Everything else, everything we had built, stayed behind for her to erase, remodel, destroy. The first month in that room, I wanted to die. The walls were stained with water damage, and the ceiling had cracks like wounds that never healed. I could hear everything: neighbors arguing, children crying, sirens wailing, traffic groaning. The noise was constant, relentless, a reminder that I had fallen from a home of peace into a world of chaos. I lay on the thin mattress on the floor and stared at the ceiling, counting those cracks, wondering which one would finally collapse and end this. I stopped eating properly. I stopped bathing regularly. I stopped reading my Bible, because what was the point? I had been faithful for 61 years, and this was my reward: abandonment, betrayal, poverty. But the human spirit is a strange thing. It survives even when you don't want it to. It finds reasons in the smallest places: a cardinal that lands on your windowsill, a neighbor who smiles, a cup of coffee that tastes like home even though nothing else does. I started going to the local community center, not to socialize, but because it was free and air-conditioned, and the afternoon heat in my room was unbearable. There, I met other women, widows mostly, some abandoned, some alone, all carrying their own heavy bags of grief and survival. We didn't share our stories at first. We just sat together in silence, and somehow that silence was more comforting than any words could be. One of them, Dorothy, was 72 and had been living alone for 15 years after her children moved to California and stopped calling. She looked at me one day and said, "You are new to this suffering, I can tell. You still have that surprised look in your eyes, like you can't believe this is your life now." I nodded, unable to speak without crying. She continued, "The surprise will fade, then comes anger, then comes acceptance, then, if you are lucky, comes purpose. Don't rush through the stages, honey. Feel everything. That is the only way through." Her words became my anchor. I let myself be angry. I let myself hate. I let myself fantasize about revenge, about Daniel realizing his mistake, about Stephanie suffering as I suffered. The anger was cleansing in its way, burning away the self-blame, the guilt, the constant questioning of what I had done wrong. 3 months after I left the house, I started receiving messages from old neighbors and friends. Strange messages, concerned messages. They asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. When I asked why, they hesitated, then told me something was wrong in the house. Stephanie was not well. She couldn't sleep. She claimed she heard sounds at night, footsteps in empty rooms, doors closing by themselves, whispers in the walls. She had stopped going to work. Daniel was worried, taking her to doctors who found nothing physically wrong. They tried everything: sleeping pills, therapy, even switching bedrooms. But the house wouldn't let her rest. The house, my house, was rejecting her. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a strange sort of peace. The house was doing what I couldn't do. It was remembering. It was fighting back. It was refusing to forget the love that built it, the prayers that sanctified it, the tears that watered it. More news came, carried by curious neighbors who tracked me down, by old friends who felt guilty for not helping me earlier. Stephanie had called priests, psychics, paranormal investigators, energy healers. Everyone came, performed their rituals, blessed and cleansed and prayed. Nothing worked. The house remained hostile, or perhaps it remained loyal to its true owner. Stephanie's parents got involved. They accused Daniel of bringing their daughter into a haunted house. They demanded he sell it immediately. But here is the thing about real estate. A house where the owner claims paranormal activity loses value fast. Word spreads. Buyers back out. The investment Stephanie was so excited about became a liability. 6 months after I left, Daniel came to find me. Someone had told him where I lived. He stood at my door, this man who looked like my son but felt like a stranger, and his eyes were red from sleeplessness, or crying, or both. He didn't enter. He just stood there and said, "Mom, Stephanie wants to talk to you. She thinks the house is angry because of what we did. She wants to apologize." I looked at him for a long moment. I wanted to feel joy, triumph, the sweetness of vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. "Tell Stephanie," I said quietly, "that the house doesn't care about apologies. Houses don't understand words. They understand presence. They understand presence. They understand love. They understand the difference between a home and an investment." Daniel's face crumbled. "Mom, please. She is not well. We can't sell the house. No one wants to buy it. She can't live there, and we can't afford to buy another place and keep paying for that one too." "We're trapped, yourself," I said, and closed the door. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I prayed. Not for revenge, not for justice, but for clarity, for understanding, for some sign of what I was supposed to do next. The next morning, Dorothy came to visit. She brought coffee and donuts, and we sat by my small window watching the street wake up. I told her everything. The house, Stephanie's suffering, Daniel's visit. She listened in silence, then said something that changed everything. "You know what your power is, Margaret. Your power is that you've already lost everything. When you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to gain. You don't need that house back. You need to decide who you want to be now. The house is just bricks and mortar, remember. You are the one who gave it meaning. You can give meaning to anywhere." Her words unlocked something in me. She was right. I had been so focused on what was taken from me that I forgot what couldn't be taken, my ability to love, to give, to create meaning from nothing. I started teaching. There were children in my neighborhood who couldn't afford tutoring, whose parents worked multiple jobs and left them unsupervised. I began offering free help with homework in my small room. First, 1 child came, then 3, then 10. I taught them everything I knew, math, reading, history, but mostly I taught them that their circumstances didn't define their worth. Word spread. Parents started contributing whatever they could. Groceries, sometimes small amounts of money, sometimes just gratitude. My room became a classroom. The landlord, an elderly Korean man named Mr. Kim, saw what I was doing and reduced my rent. "You are doing good work," he said. "Let me help." I was happy, not the same happiness I had known in my married life, not the security and comfort of that old existence, but a different kind of happiness. A happiness that came from purpose, from being needed, from building something that wasn't based on blood relations or legal papers, but on genuine connection. 9 months after I left the house, Stephanie came to see me. She came alone, and she looked terrible, thin, dark circles under her eyes, hair uncombed, designer clothes wrinkled. She stood at my door, and for a moment we just looked at each other. The woman who had destroyed my life and the woman who had survived the destruction. "I can't live there," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I see you everywhere. In every corner, every room, I hear sounds I've never heard before. I smell cooking I never cooked. The house hates me, Margaret. It wants you back." I could have gloated. I could have turned her away. Instead, I invited her in for coffee. We sat on my floor, this woman who had taken everything and this woman who had nothing, and we drank cheap coffee in mismatched mugs. "The house doesn't hate you," I finally said. "The house doesn't feel anything. It is just a structure. What you are experiencing is guilt, Stephanie. Guilt is more haunting than any ghost could ever be." She started crying, deep, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "I didn't know it would be like this. I just wanted a better life. I wanted nice things. I didn't think about what it would cost you. I didn't think about you at all." Her honesty was brutal, but it was also freeing, because in that moment, I realized something crucial. She hadn't destroyed me out of malice. She had erased me out of indifference, which was somehow worse, and yet also more forgivable. Malice requires acknowledging someone's existence. Indifference doesn't. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "Forgiveness. Permission? I don't know. Daniel is falling apart. Our marriage is breaking. Everything we did to get that house is destroying us. I finished my coffee and looked at her carefully. I can't give you forgiveness, Stephanie. That is not mine to give. You didn't sin against me. You sinned against yourself, against what you could have been, against the family you could have had. The house will let you rest when you let yourself rest, when you stop running from what you did. She looked at me with desperate eyes. How do I do that? Start by being honest with Daniel. Tell him the truth about who you are, what you wanted, why you did what you did. Let him decide if he can love the real you. Then find a way to live with yourself. That is harder than any haunting. She left that day without promises or solutions, but she left different somehow. Lighter, maybe, or at least more honest about her weight. A month later, Daniel came alone. This time, I let him in. He sat on my floor. This tall man who was once my baby boy, and he cried in a way I had never seen him cry. Not even when his father died. I am so sorry, Mom, he said over and over, like a broken prayer. I am so sorry. And I, who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, who had imagined all the cutting things I would say, all the ways I would make him feel my pain, said simply, I know. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked, Can you ever forgive me? I thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, Daniel. Forgiveness isn't something you give once and it is done. It is something you choose every day, and some days I can choose it, and some days I can't. But I can tell you this, I don't wish suffering on you. I don't want revenge. I just want peace, and I found some of it here. He looked around my small room at the children's notebooks stacked in the corner, at my simple life, and I saw shame and regret, and something else in his eyes, respect maybe, or recognition. The house, he started, then stopped. Keep it or sell it. I don't care anymore, I said, and I meant it. It is not the house I miss, Daniel. It is the family I thought I had. It is the son I raised who I thought would never choose a building over his mother. But you did, and that is something we both have to live with. Stephanie wants to sell it and give you your share, he said quietly. Half of everything. It is only right. I shook my head. I don't want it. I don't want anything from that house. Let it go. Let me go. Build your life, Daniel. But build it honestly. Don't build it on someone else's bones. He stayed for an hour, and we talked about small things, safe things, nothing important. When he left, we didn't hug, didn't make promises about staying in touch. We just acknowledged that we had been something once and were something different now, and that had to be enough. 3 years have passed since that day. 3 years of living in this small room that has become more home than that house ever was after Robert died. 3 years of teaching children who call me Miss Margaret and bring me their problems and their small joys. 3 years of friendships with women who understand survival, who know that life doesn't always reward the good or punish the bad, but demands that we keep living anyway. I heard through the neighborhood network that Daniel and Stephanie sold the house finally to a young couple expecting their first child. I heard that they moved to a smaller apartment. I heard that they're still together, working through their problems, growing up too late but still growing. I don't think about them much anymore. Not with anger, not with longing, not with anything, really. They've become characters in a story I once lived, and I am living a different story now. The house, though, I think about the house sometimes. I wonder if the new owners are happy there. I wonder if the walls have forgotten me, or if somewhere in the foundation, in the spaces between bricks, in the soil where magnolias once grew, there remains an echo of the woman who loved that place, so completely, so absolutely, that even abandonment couldn't kill it. People ask me sometimes if I got my revenge. They expect stories of dramatic confrontation, of justice served, of the wicked punished, and the good rewarded. But life isn't a movie, and revenge isn't always what we imagine. My revenge was surviving. My revenge was rebuilding. My revenge was proving that I was more than a house, more than a role, more than what anyone decided I should be. My revenge was watching them destroy themselves with guilt while I built myself with purpose. The house remembered, yes, but more importantly, I remembered. I remembered who I was before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's burden. I remembered that I was Margaret first, always Margaret, and that identity couldn't be stolen or sold or thrown away. I am 63 years old. I sit in this small room as evening, light filters through the window, casting long shadows on these walls that have absorbed 3 years of new memories, new prayers, new tears of both sadness and joy. The children will come soon for their lessons. Dorothy will visit with coffee and gossip. Mr. Kim will check if I need anything repaired. This is my life now. Small, simple, significant, in ways that house never was, despite its size and value and all the years I spent there. They say a house is just bricks and mortar. Maybe they're right. Maybe the real home was never in those walls. Maybe it was always in me, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be built in a place where I chose to be, not where I was allowed to exist. The house remembered me, yes, but the real victory is that I remembered myself, and that is the revenge no one can take away.